life was either stagnation or transition, decomposition or transcendence. And for the most part, that people were shallow and incidental. These were constants that could contradict and confuse even the most overzealous, sanctimonious civil servant. Life had become a rut into which consciousness had been forced. He'd been recently engaged in a dispute with the city council over an unpaid tax bill. He argued that as he was in a transitory phase and just passing through, he should not have to pay. Pickhart had lived here all his life.
Life is stagnation, but not by creation. I'm becoming a machine. All this talking is getting us nowhere. Just fueling our apathy. With the light on.
Pickhart had been thinking of leaving as long as he could remember, thinking that if one stays in one place long enough, one becomes the place one loathes. Yet due to the economic depression, under the cloak of austerity, he, along with everybody else he knew, had decided to stay and consolidate the misery. We have become detached from our own unitary time-space. Freedom has all but vanished. Our futures need to be mapped. The spontaneity has disappeared from our lives. We have become passive spectators to dystopian agendas, quangos, and self-ordained bodies. Not yet knowing what we seek, we are seekers without a clue. Each passing second merely conveys me from the instant that has just been to the instant next to come. Each second spirits me away from myself. No now ever materializes.
tap my window on a world
This is a microcosm, thought Pickhart. Look closer and you will see automatons rushing with no real incentive other than their own falsified and self-justified needs. Of late, my life seems to be a series of ever-increasing circles, yet when they become a certain size, float away like bubbles. Thus the energy expended is to no avail, and the answer remains unknown. I resign myself to thinking that I am letting go of something that is fundamentally me. Is part of me wrapped up within that? Am I growing or changing? Then my mind wanders again. I see a factory conveyor belt bring me more dilemmas in irregular shaped packages. The conveyor belt stretches far into the distance, as far as I can see. I cannot see how much more there is to process, but I know that I am working alone. The packages arrive within arm's reach, and once the unravelling process begins, they are overwhelming. Imagine your thoughts arriving vacuum-packed.
This is the part where I want to get off. I'm not happy with the status quo.
Maybe love is the all-powerful presence that cures everything. Right now I need a cure for anxiety, thought Pickhart. Everything I've read states, find the source and gradually disempower it. Easy on paper, he thought. The place was changing, and Pickhart had felt of late that he was being left behind. He was often reminded how the pavement latte culture had come here. He remembered life before the gentrification, and thought how it still felt like a hand-to-mouth existence. He mused upon how the new folk were not unlike anybody else in this political climate. Namely, they had found their escapism through illusion. He'd just left a relationship that had become too toxic. He felt drained and strangely aloof. Something was compelling him to live each day as though it was his last. Something unseen, yet familiar, though still unknown. In an effort to lift the malady of the previous 43 years, Pickhart had been taken in by nature. At 27, I thought I knew it all. The world could be shaped to suit my needs. As I got older, the waves of doubt, negativity and apathy grew higher. I began to realize I knew nothing, I still know nothing. Until one day you open your eyes and find yourself in a cell of your own making. You find that you have slept away a whole chapter or chapters of your life. Pickhart said that when he had spoke of his dreams, thoughts and aspirations, he had to pre-qualify every sentence with, "I'm not going mad, but I think," because people would cast doubt, albeit their own doubt. The truth is, nobody likes change, except bus drivers. Pickhart was suddenly and without warning ripped away from the life he had forged, the life he had carved, the life with illusions and distractions to keep reality out. The emptiness in that moment drowned him, consuming all his hopes and dreams. He was left raw and exposed to the pain of unresolved loss. The sorrow engulfed his body. He wished he could cry, but the trauma was buried deep. Even if the tears could be summoned, would he ever be able to forget the lost face of beauty he had once held? With you, the grass blew in the wind and stretched far into the distance. The vast ocean represented time. Carried by a wave, I avoided being present with myself. Though my heart was gladdened, something lacked on the horizon. Maybe my heart was young and easily pacified. The sun blessed our lives, yet we hid in the shade, too fearful to bask in its light. The clouds grew on our sunrise. With sunset, we began our demise. High romance had started to wane. Eros had been slain. Aphrodite finally erased. Hermes lay in wait.
Would you leave or escape or avoid these constraints that I weave? 'Cause it strikes to the core. I'm drowning here. I'm drowning here. And I know that I lack the truth today.
There is always something about a deserted street scene that gives me hope, said Pickhart. Every morning I awake believing I have the world in the palm of my hands. The future is mine, ideas overbrimming from my already overstimulated mind. As the day progresses, I become distracted, diverted, and then jaded. The focus is removed by mundane tasks, and I live being sidetracked. Pickhart had been involved in a series of failed relationships. People place too much emphasis on love. Love is as love does. I have of late been grounded in a malaise. In relationship, I have had my flaws, weaknesses, and my own despair exposed.
You can say that's okay if you like what you see. Go along with what you want by your own
worlds met describe the same things as inner turmoil. By using metaphor and allegory, are we only then able to digest in bite-sized chunks? Is life a metaphor? If it is, it can be a very discomforting one. Life being the whole thing, with its stage, bit-part actors, pockets of resistance, decadence, decay, avoidance, acceptance, and denial. Man is the sum of all parts, and at the same time insignificant. No time for such complexities in a metaphysical world, exclaimed Pickhart. I read that the life you choose will try to accommodate you. Being resolute is the key to this. Pickhart believed that happiness was in others. He longed for the days when life was a carefree occupation and boredom could be alleviated by doing natural things. Life has become engineered, so there is very little time to sit and think. We are bombarded with things that have no value, things that we feel that we need, things that will eventually become a millstone that we are tethered to.
All we want is better understanding, and all we need is to be less demanding.
Could this be the very same place that in the years between 1700 and 1807, 2,000 slave ships were outfitted? In addition to this, in a not so far off land and time, the sugar and tobacco industries enslaved men, women and children. Pickhart felt nauseous. He remembered his great-grand working in a tobacco factory not far from here. She said that the hours were long, she was poorly paid, and endured this for 6 days a week, all at the age of 12. As an artist, Pickhart believed that he busied himself to avoid the cold, dead weight of the world. Yet the true artist binges on life, then vomits it back up. He'd noticed that the bust of Plimsoll had been removed from its original location. He was gladdened and imagined Plimsoll escaping to take part in the world at large, just like he did when he was alive. He was of late finding it more and more difficult to recognize the feeling of drowning. He felt overwhelmed. If only there was a waterline. Seeing isn't always believing. Pickhart said that as a child it was inherent in him to believe that he lived in the best country in the world. Furthermore, it was the envy of the world. As he got older, he realized that this was a deeply flawed vision. The truth being that the best the country could hope for was a role as a bit-part actor on the world stage. This concept was embraced by former Prime Minister Tony Blair when allying himself to America in the so-called War on Terror. The truth was that Britain was no longer a groundbreaking forward visionary. Pickhart felt that the problem with all visionaries is that they come to believe in their own legend, and usually at the expense of others. He pondered over whether the loss of life was worth it for one man's folly. He recognized that some areas of life were unregulated. When it came to banking, it appeared to be about gambling working people's money at no risk to bankers in the pursuit of profit for the elite.
bathroom going round in circles all the time. Make no decisions, no choices or no plans. Go in several directions at once, but somehow I stay where I am.
The 60s urbanism decimates the sky, reducing light into our already blinkered eyes. From here the path looked inviting. We never left the house, knowing that if we arrived, it would be less exciting. The journey being everything and immediate, the destination, the dream, and the arrival, the anticlimax. Signposts seem to point to a place that I have an excited and idyllic view about, thought Pickhart. But upon arrival, the image is deflated. Is it that that place no longer exists, or never existed? Yet there is still something which draws me. It is like a magnet. I am consumed and soothed. Blink and the eyes are blind. The now is past, past. For to really embrace the now is to attempt to hold on to what immediately becomes the past. Pickhart often wondered how things might look if he'd done things differently in the past. He'd been held by the belief that his best days were those to come. Always in hindsight, he was never more misguided. Obstacles to our dreams and desires, obstacles of our own making, overburdened by the weight of the past, yet we are born into this world naked.
When hands are behind my back, they'll never say I like feet of clay. I wonder how I can stop myself.
Pickhart said that it was time to reclaim utilitarianism back from the petty bourgeoisie and for the liquidation of parasitic bankers. On the 29th of October 1831, after the House of Lords had rejected a second reform bill that would have allowed greater representation for the people, a riot broke out. Votes were only given to people who paid rents of more than £10 per year. Thus, only 6,000 of the 104,000 populace was eligible to vote. As a result of the riots, work on the bridge was halted, and Brunel was made a special constable. Some 5,000 to 10,000 rioters took part. Subsequently, for their part in it, Christopher Davis, John Case, Thomas Gregory, and William Clark were all hanged at the entrance of the new jail in January 1832. Pickhart had returned from the records office, where he had hoped to find a comprehensive list of toll houses. He returned only with information of the Bristol Bridge riot on the 30th of September 1793, where John Abbott, William Aldridge, James Bennett, Isaac Davis, Elizabeth Egan, Anthony Gill, James Howell, John Jones, Humphrey Lewis, William Morgan, and William Powell had all lost their lives during protests against the renewal of an act of levying tolls. We live in uncertain times. Stillness still, yet this is the backdrop of our lives. The forces of nature are caught up with market forces. They cannot coexist. They always conflict. One must always cede to the other's advances. Once a nation of shopkeepers and manufacturing, Britain had now become a nation of bankers and was being run by money-obsessed plutocrats. Whilst it was true that the rich were getting richer and the poor ever poorer, Pickhart suggested that this did not matter, as we were all spiritually bankrupt anyway.
We're all lost. It's in what we want to find. Jesus Christ, there's a darkness up ahead. Things I valued came to a natural end. When it burns, nothing matters. You still lead the life you want to lead. In the morning, now it's over. All that's left are the ashes of a memory.
Gone of the heavy industry and investment in the infrastructure. Yet Britain still had some of the longest working hours in Europe. Pickhart was also increasingly incensed by the doom and gloom brigade, who believed that it was finished.
Now we're lost, and we both know the cause. When it burned, nothing mattered. You still led the life you want to lead.
Clouds drift, we sift. Pickhart had felt uneasy throughout a lot of his experiences. Procrastination had always been an obstacle he could rely upon to keep him from fulfilling or even commencing his ideas. Pickhart had become an existential dreamer, lost in the realms of romantic idealistic notions that some had even called naivety. The classicism of our art is in the making. Oftentimes our perception binds us to rigidity. Ideas stagnate, and we end up in a malaise.
Hey Captain, are we heading for the rocks? Hey Captain, are we bound for collision course? Feeling lost, feeling tired, feeling like I just don't matter, feeling crushed.
The night and city always come with the promise of new adventures. The only thing moving was the rain and the traffic, rushing to fill the empty minutes, eyes on the prize. This ain't living, Pickhart said. He had seen most of this stolid backwater. He believed that this place was the last stop, the place you end up whilst aimlessly drifting. He did not see any spirit of life, only youths in hoodies glued to street corners.
Wasted my time at the end of the line. Wasted my breath on bitterness. Can't you see see what it's doing to me? Can't you derive from that look in my eyes how I feel? Wasted my days.
In the instance of Hollow, I am questioning my existence with rejuvenated vigour. The unconscious belongs to me only in dreams, and even there I cannot tell if what I see lingering is a form marked for birth or filth that I've rejected. The subconscious is what emerges from the premises of my internal will, but I am very unsure as to who reigns there, though I suspect it is not I, but rather a pack of adverse wills which, for reasons unknown to me, think in me, but never had any other thought than that of usurping my very own place in my body and in myself. But in my pre-conscious, where all these same adverse wills seek to abuse and distract me with their temptations, I can clearly see them once I arm myself with my full consciousness. I thus came to feel that I must travel upstream and delve into my pre-conscious until I could see myself evolving and desiring.
Searching for something that might not exist. Can't you see what it's doing to me? Can't you derive from that look in my eyes how I feel? Wasted my life on.
Is it better to sit under a sheltering sky, or to embrace thunderclouds on high? Pickhart pondered on life's choices that had brought him to this place. He saw life now as a series of options, and this had created a loosening up of his rigidness and fixity. Yet he could always be pulled back into the abyss of other people's reality at the drop of a hat. Nothing sustained him. He was like a pendulum blown by the wind of time. Others, push me, pull me counterculture, had invaded his senses almost completely. Pickhart said that when I gaze upon the natural, I believe anything is possible. Yet time escapes me, and I am driven by this yearning, but it feels like a rite of passage to divinity. He had always been troubled with endings, but always hoped in the end his mind would find peace and that his angst would have an exit. We move in circles, but change can only begin in our perception. Pickhart had always had his ideas cemented by other people's experience. He had felt blocked and stifled as long as he could remember. Lately, his circle of friends had become few and more resistive to his actions.
From the landscape in your eyes, witness I have acquired, since fully realized. Where is the love that can't be found? Where is the loving now? You want it, you got it, fire in the soul.
Sometimes the things we want and want to hold on to elude us. Yet with the right soundtrack, life rewrites itself. Pickhart had been living in the moment, in a being kind of way. Yet he still complained of what he deemed as the fluff of humanity being stored away and saved for him. Pickhart had discovered that sometimes the place one wants to reach is not always reachable at the time of trying to reach it, and by the means one is trying to reach it. Some things are not linked directly. We have to depart at what is considered in our limited perception as the end of the line. The place we set out to arrive at can still be reached by other means and routes. Pickhart had been disappointed by the speed of things. We miss the most important parts of our existence sometimes. Everything is reduced to a blur as we race towards our perceived destiny. We never truly arrive if all the stations in between upon our journey are passed by unknowingly. We would have and should have set the world alight, but first I had to conquer myself. Pickhart had heard that the New World Order had plans to reduce the global population down to 500 million. He mused upon this as he observed the remains of the traces of a chemtrail that coloured the sky. What if we were all only an experiment and mankind was invented to be enslaved? He had been troubled by some people's resistance to alternative worldviews. He wondered why, as a society, we are able to accept and swallow wholesale the media-driven version of events, as opposed to the proposed views pertaining to another version of the same events. All too readily, the alternative view is dismissed and labelled conspiracy theory. Where does the resistance stem from? How can people believe in a God they have never seen, yet dismiss the alternative views of events and history? We've come to a place where, in the absence of reason, all opposition now represents treason. Pickhart believed it was a search for the absolute truth and nothing but. Polarities, equilibrium, scales, shifting sands, a melting pot, all need to exist. Even then, we may only ever find compromise. Do we take inanimate objects and anthropomorphisize them because it is safer than trying to relate to our fellow creatures? The mind-body split will eventually consume us all. Even in our minds we are split. Each day we disappear a little further into the abyss. Each day we die a little more. Most people only recognize happiness when it's gone. Moreover, happiness may only ever be a memory. Yet having travelled the path, am I now only at the doorstep, the threshold, looking into a house that I never really looked inside of? A house with rooms I may have thought I knew. A house where light does not always reach the corners I am standing in.
Build a bridge, his plans were written dust. When the gate is open, the animal gets loose. Said he wanted freedom, but liberty costs. Now he's out for sympathy and lying in the dirt. When something gets broken, it's buried in the mud. Some misunderstanding is the reason we're all fucked. Pickhart was old before he ever begun to love the life he had in the magic hand of chance. Words got trampled lightly by fools who never heard. There's logic in his ideas and craving in his words. Though the wind blew heavy, the breeze it wasn't cold. Sheltered from existence and focused on his goals.